Right, so, The Witcher Season of Storms. Realise the only thing that I actually revealed by moving one of my fingers was of. So, The Witcher of. First of all, little update before we talk about The Witcher Season of Storms. Thankmas this year, my capture card has decided to essentially shit itself. So what we're going to do is Thankmas will not be happening this year. The games that I would have been playing through Thankmas, Sonic Generations, Astro Bot, Final Fantasy VII Remake, or Rebirth, should I say, I'm probably just gonna play them in my own spare time anyway. Gaming videos that go up on the channel probably won't be happening throughout the next month. In January, I'm going to actually invest in a proper, decent capture card, not just one to tie me over. I'm actually going to invest in like an Elgato, because going cheap for a capture card just doesn't cut it. This one that I've had for like 3 months, like 3-4 months maybe, and it just kind of didn't work. It just kind of shat the bed a little bit. So yeah, Thankmas this year will not be going ahead. You can still donate to the Totify page if you so desire. Anyway, I'll probably still be linking that in the descriptions of videos and such, but actual charity marathon, as far as that is concerned, that will go in January. Probably won't be the whole of January, but as soon as I get this new capture card in January, probably the first week of streams that I do when I come back in the new year, so the second week of January will probably be fundraising for Thankmas, what I missed. It won't be anything big or special. It'll probably just be like some Disney Speedstorm stuff, maybe checking out like the first week of Dragon Age, the Vanguard, maybe, but it won't be any like specific like big marathon stuff. It's unfortunate that it seems to have been the last couple marathons that I've done, I've had some kind of tech issue with it, and maybe it's telling me to stop, but you know, I'll just keep trucking through it. And unfortunately, that's the situation that's happened this year. Not much I could have done around it, but thankfully, I'm now in a better financial situation than I was when those other ones happened. So there's still going to be content coming up on the channel, and probably it's a blessing in disguise. So I can now put more time into content on the channel as well. However, Thankmas just isn't going to. There's no way I can record games There's no way I can record games without it looking terrible, unfortunately, and I don't want to do that. I want every stream I do to look 100%, and especially if it's a charity stream, I want it to look as good as I want it to look good. I don't want essentially to be raising money for charity, and the actual content I'm producing to be of a subpar standard as well. But anyways, enough talk about that. Let's talk about The Witcher Season of Storms. I am about halfway through the book. Just finished chapter 10 of 20. There have been several interludes, intermissions as well, and even chapter 10 doesn't end exactly halfway through the book. But it's the best halfway point that I'm going to find. So essentially, first impressions of this book, I would say, if you want to read The Witcher, and I would say this is the book I would give you first. It's definitely the most digestible. It's definitely the most easy to follow. It's just Geralt. It's Geralt. Dandelion is there, but he's not really a focal point to the story. There's no Yennefer, there's no Ciri. It is very much just Geralt going on a mission. It's just a tale from Geralt's past. Before Ciri, in between Yennefer explorations. So the love interest in this, or the sorceress that Geralt is having sex with in this, is not Yennefer, but does have a connection to Sodden Hill, which is something that happens after this book takes place, or may happen at the end of this book. I don't know. I haven't gotten to the end yet. But the biggest praise that I can give this is that it is paced extremely much quicker than the rest of the series. The rest of the series very much felt like, as much as each book had chapters in it, it felt like each book was a chapter of a bigger story. It didn't feel like each book was 100% successful at being at having a beginning, middle, and end. It felt very much like the first two books were beginning, like setup, and then the second two books were middle, and then the final book was end. This is definitely, I think, because it is like a one and done, it's definitely being paced a lot quicker, and it's being paced as a single one and done story. And I like that. I like that a lot. Like when the action hits, it's snappy, it's fun, it's kinetic, or it feels kinetic anyway. As kinetic as you can be, like reading a book anyway, as kinetic as a book can be. The actual story itself, I don't know if it is on par with the rest of the Witcher series. The way it's being told is much better and is more my taste, because it is more straightforward A to B, and that is why I would say that this is the one that I would start with if you are new to The Witcher, if you haven't read any of the other books. First, if you want to start picking up the series, I would say this is the one to probably read first. There are going to be some things in it that you won't quite get, but you will get as you read more books in the series. But because this takes place before the series does, I would say read it first. I would also say it's a better, or it's just a more contemporary style in terms of the way it's paced. Not necessarily the language that's used. It's still a lot of purple prose, as people in the book community would say. It's still very like flowery with the language that's used, but I would say like chapter length especially is a thing that I would say is a massive bonus going for this book, and I think it's a more contemporary thing. The shortening of chapters is something that probably took place, that probably like happened somewhere in the mid 2000s, because let me just tell you, 50-page chapters, I do not want to go back to that. I have been loving the, 10, 20 at a push chapter length, page chapter length in this book. Where it comes down to what I haven't enjoyed as much, again, Dandelion's in this book for quite a lot of it. He wasn't in Lady of the Lake for a lot of that. That's why Lady of the Lake is one of my favourites. I will get to the actual ranking of the series in the second half of the video, but Dandelion is in this for a decent bit of it. He's not as bad as he is when he shows up in the main series or when he shows up in the short stories. But his presence, I think, just kind of annoys me a little bit. Like I said, there is no Yennefer, no Ciri, so the book can feel a little bit one note. There is no... I guess Geralt is a juxtaposition to everyone else, but there is no real, I don't know if I like Geralt enough, if I find him interesting enough to lead a story on his own. This version of Geralt, anyway, because obviously it's different to the Geralt that's in the games, it's different to the Geralt that's in the show, because everyone's portraying Geralt in a different way. I feel like the book version of Geralt is a lot more of just, your regular straight man, who is, I mean that as in, the stoic, serious type, not straight as in heterosexual, even though he is very heterosexual and very horny as well. He basically fucks everything that breathes. Basically everything that moves, whether it's with a sword or with his penis. But yeah, I like Geralt as a character. I don't know if I find him interesting or just find him badass. I don't know if he's... Because of where he is in this book specifically, he hasn't gone through any, growth. This is before he goes through any, growth in the rest of the series, and where he is in this is just, the stoic, slightly sarcastic character who's quick to kind of make an enemy of everyone, which that kind of character does annoy me a little bit, because yes, his worldview is very different to everyone around him, but there is no subtlety in Geralt's sarcasm, and there's no, it seems like there's nothing else really to his character in the book so far, anyway. I know there is more in the series, but where he is at this point in this book, I'm not 100% on board with his character as a whole. And that's kind of a problem that I've had with the whole series throughout, is that I haven't felt that Geralt is hugely interesting as a main protagonist, which is why having Ciri and having Yennefer and having the rest of the party as well felt more like it was lifting up Geralt to be almost more interesting than he actually is. Geralt has standout moments, but none of them have been in this book. He's had some cool fight scenes, that's about it. But I don't enjoy Geralt being sarcastic. That's kind of my least favourite part of his characterisation. And that seems to be a lot of what his characterisation is in this. I did say at the end of my video on Lady of the Lake that I thought doing a prequel, and my big problem with prequels in general is it always can feel like there's no stakes. what this book does that I think is genius and kind of goes against that is it doesn't take itself seriously at all. It doesn't feel like this is a serious book. This is definitely played more as like a absurdist comedy kind of. It doesn't go quite that far, but it is putting Geralt into these situations of, yes, he might die, and yes, he is going against like monsters and demons and stuff like that, but he's not taking the rest of the world seriously, and the rest of the world doesn't take, and the place that he's in is full of characters that are not serious, or situations that are absurd. Like, he goes into this, like the people that are kind of like checking him to go into this town or to go into this like city area. First of all, the big crux of this story, and the reason why the swords are on the cover, is because the whole point of this book is Geralt's swords have been stolen and he needs to get them back. And the people that are meant to be looking after his swords is this group of like burly, bald, muscly women that all they eat are beans and peas, so they're constantly farting all the time. And it's stuff like that I think is genius about this book, because it could easily, I think, played fully straight, played super seriously, this book would have lost everything. There would have been, when you do a prequel, you can either center around a completely different character, so that there's stakes around that character that isn't in the main continuity, that isn't in the main story, or you can play it completely for laughs. This doesn't go completely for laughs, but it does go more on the absurdist angle than I think the rest of the series does. I would say this is closer to Baptism of Fire in tone than the rest of the series. It's not nearly as dark as Tower of the Swallow, not nearly as dark as Lady of the Lake, and it doesn't have the big bombastic moments that Time of Contempt had, and it's a good book, which Blood of Elves wasn't. I'm sorry to say that. If you're a fan of Blood of Elves, read the rest of the series. I'm such an asshole, I'm sorry. But yeah, this is shaping up to be probably one of the better books in the series, and I would say this is the best starting point in the series. There's a lot of nods to the rest of the series, but those aren't things that I wouldn't say you need to know them going into this. It's just, if you read this first, those are things that are going to interest you, pique your interest going forward with the rest of the series, or going back to the rest of the series. I will let you know about the second half of the book in the second half of the video, but as for right now, about halfway in, I am really enjoying it. I will see you guys in a couple of seconds for the second half of the video. Yeah. I have no idea how to do these midpoint, like, outro things, but I'll see you guys when I finish the book. And we are done with The Witcher. It's been a hell of a ride, let's be honest. It has been a good half a year spent with Geralt, Ciri, Yennefer. I pay good money to spend half a year with Yennefer. I'm sorry. But yeah, we've spent half a year with Geralt together, you and I, Me and you, the two of us together. But yeah, we're going to talk about the rest of the second half, or just over half, of The Witcher Season of Storms, and then we are going to do a series ranking of The Witcher series, including the short stories, including the saga, including Season of Storms as well, not including that new book that came out on the 1st in Polish. Anyway, Season of Storms. I will keep my original opinion of this being the book that I would start the series with, especially because it kind of bookends with going straight into The Last Wish, and where Geralt is at the end of this book is the start of The Last Wish. Geralt isn't a different character at the end of Lady of the Lake as he is at the start of this. And this is canonically the first book in the series, unless if you go by the newest book, which is a prequel to even this, which is, basically the start of The Witcher, the first adventure of Geralt. Do I know if they're going to be able to get a full book out of that? Well, it exists. So, whether how big that book is or not, I reckon it'll probably be the same size as that. Probably. Did I enjoy this more than the series? I don't think so. I enjoyed the act of reading this book more so than I did something like Blood of Elves or Time of Contempt or all the rest of the series, because the shorter chapters are a godsend. Being able to just open the book, read a chapter and be done is so good. Maybe there's people that can read 50 pages of a 50-page chapter in a sitting. I'm not one of those people. Maybe I will become one of those people by the time that I've read like hundreds of books, if not thousands of books. Maybe I'll be someone that can do that. I can't do that at the moment. But yeah, being able to bust out a chapter, basically get through a chapter a night, and sometimes 2 chapters a night, and the book has like interludes and epilogues and prologues and that as well. So I'm more, because there's so much like separation and there's so many like paragraph breaks and there's so many like page breaks and there's so many there are so many breaks for chapters. It makes the book all the more readable when you're getting to like a chapter checkpoint and you're like, just get another chapter done as well. It's just an interlude, I'll get that done as well. It makes you like feel like you're getting through the book even quicker than trudging through a 50-page chapter. Sometimes like those early books in the series, like Blood of Elves especially, 50 pages per chapter with no page breaks at all, no page breakers at all. It does feel like a slog to get through, even though it is such a short book. It feels all the more longer because of that, because you're not really getting to any like checkpoints or anything like that. Even like if a page ends on a sentence or ends on a full stop or ends on punctuation, it still feels like when you pick it back up with the next page, it still feels like you're, whoa, what was going on? What's happening? But with this book, there's none of that. It's a lot easier to find I would call it the book equivalent of a save point. it's much easier, and they come much quicker in this, and that's why this is probably the easiest Witcher book to read and recommend to a first time, someone just dipping their toe into fantasy, someone that is someone like me that is new to reading books like this, just in general, that's maybe coming out of comic book reading, maybe like only reads manga. Someone like that, this would be the most recommendable book of the series so far, or just the most recommendable book of the series. Do I think it's the best on a content level? Do I think it's the best? Do I think it's the best in terms of what is actually in the book? No. That's also why I would say it's a good starting point. Not only because of canonically it's the start of the story. It's canonically before the rest of the series starts. It's canonically before even the short stories start. But I would also say this is probably the most straightforward Witcher book. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but this is the most like A to B book. It's very much just Geralt arrives in a town. Geralt, things happen to Geralt in this town. Geralt goes out of the town, fights a few sorcerers, fights a big monster, goes back to the town. Things happen, political intrigue happens. Not a lot of it, though, because, there's only so much real estate in 350 pages anyways. But most of that is big action sequences, which I'm thankful for. I don't feel like we had enough action sequences in the main the main series as a whole anyways. They definitely saved them all for the last book. And even then, it felt like it was all in the middle of the last book. But I would say this is definitely the one that I would recommend first. And I've made that point a lot. That's probably, if you're playing a drinking game, take a shot every time I say that this is the one I recommend first. But I do think that narratively this is not the weakest in the series, but I would say because it is more tongue-in-cheek, it is more comedic, in terms of, the situation that Geralt's put in, just the tone of the book in general, the fact that it is Geralt in this place of like weirdos, and just like it feels like a Saturday morning cartoon that's written like someone trying to do Lord of the Rings. And there is depth to it at the end, definitely. And Geralt losing his swords, and basically this is the story for like to prove that Geralt is more than just his weapons, and to prove that he's more than just his Witcher accoutrement. And I feel like we don't need that story, because he doesn't have much, if any, of the Witcher equipment throughout the actual series. So I think he loses his swords at the end of Time of Contempt, which is the second book which is book 2 of 5. So he goes through 3 books in that series. One of them the length of 2 of the rest of the books in the series without his swords. He gets a dwarven, like, sigil, I think it's called, in Baptism of Fire. That that's cool, and he seems to be able to do more damage with that than he did with either of his Witcher swords. You know, and that's why I feel like this is the one you give to someone first, because there's so many things in this that are already in the series, or that, you know, you get, or things that are tropes of the Witcher series that if you read this one, if this is the first one that you read, they're not going to feel tropey, like Geralt with a sorceress, Geralt having sex with multiple women at the same time, you know, misogyny. You know, there's so much in this book that is just a trope of The Witcher. Maybe a trope of fantasy, but a trope of The Witcher in general. You're gonna get a well-rounded view of Geralt, which is something that you would already have if you're reading this as the last one, like I did. And it does feel very samey after a while. It feels like we're going backwards and forwards so much, and it does feel very repetitive, and it feels like a video game. I would not be surprised if the first Witcher game, which this is definitely not the inspiration for that, because the first Witcher game is older than this, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is inspiration for at least part of one of the games, because this is laid out very much like a video game, where you've got the main quest and you've got side quests, and you know, you can feel obvious things where that would be a boss fight, that would be a like a sequence, that would be like a cool cutscene to see. You know, you can kind of see these moments play out in your head, and maybe that's a good thing for a book to instill in you. But also, I couldn't help feeling like the book was structured like a video game, with the whole the swords have been taken, we've got to get them back, but also this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, and you've got a big journey to go to this place which has nothing to do with your swords being taken, but you know, you got to deal with these things. Meanwhile, there's a woman that you've got to keep visiting for evening sexy time. There is a lot to like with The Witcher Season of Storms, but I couldn't help feeling like it was retreading old ground that the rest of the series had already done before, and I couldn't help feeling like it kept going in circles a bit. The end and the payoff, it is cool, and I can probably say that the conclusion of this book is more satisfying than the conclusion of the actual series. Like, in terms of things building up to a conclusion in one solitary book, I can say that the conclusion of this book, for what it is more satisfying than the conclusion of the Witcher saga, even though the Witcher saga does have a bigger, more bombastic ending to it. This feels like more of a conclusion for what it is. That being said, there are 8 books in this series, so what is my favourite book in the Witcher series, first of all, and where do I rank every other book in the series? Well, sit right there, I'll go through them. It's going to be a second for you, but it's going to be like 5 seconds for me. Right, so Witcher series ranking time. I've told you my individual thoughts for each book. Now I'm going to quickly go over and surmise my feelings towards each book in a ranked format, not dissimilar to a tier list, but without the visual cues of a tier list. So, first off, my least favourite book in the series, and the first book in the Witcher saga, Blood of the Elves. I just feel like this is Sapkowski, like, getting his bearings with how to write a ongoing story that lasts the length of a book. And it does feel like, and I went through this in my video for it, it feels like growing pains. It doesn't feel like... It still feels very much like a short story collection instead of an actual book itself. It doesn't feel like a narrative necessarily. There's a continuation from chapter to chapter, and each chapter takes place after the last. But it feels like there's a disconnect between what is happening in each chapter. Every chapter has a clear thing that it's doing that is nothing to do with what happened in the last chapter. Even though the through line is Ciri kind of harnessing her abilities and kind of just training in Kaer Morhen. I find Ciri in this book absolutely, like, irrehensible. I find her really annoying. Triss is in no means my favourite character in the series. So spending so much time with her is a bit annoying as well. And yeah, the reasons why I don't like Triss take place later on in the series, but going back to this book and how much time she spends in this book and how much page real estate is given to her is really just like, that could have gone to building up Geralt as a character, that could have gone to Yennefer, that could have gone to building up a villain, that could have gone to introducing Vilgefortz instead of him coming out of nowhere in the next book. You know, there's a lot of things that could have been done in this book that I feel like if Sapkowski were a stronger author by the time that this book came out, I'm not critiquing his writing now, where he is now, but his writing when he was writing this in the year 2000 or 1998 or whenever this book came out. It probably would have been the late 90s if the book came out in the year 2000. So yeah, it's just, in my opinion, the weakest book in the series, but by no means a bad book. You know, spending time in Kaer Morhen is fun. Vesemir himself is a cool Vesemir is a cool character in and of himself, and I wish there was more of him in the series. However, unfortunately, there is not. But it looks like there's going to be more of him in the show, unfortunately with a different actor behind him, which is unfortunate, but, you know, things like that are going to happen. The number 2, or my kind of like D tier of this series, is The Tower of the Swallow. I feel like this is just tonally not my kind of thing. I prefer, and as we're going to find out later on in the video, I prefer the books that are lighter in tone. This is just too much torture porn for me, personally. I don't... Like, this is the book that I remember the most for all the wrong reasons. The stuff with Geralt is cool, and, like, you know, learning who Angorme is and getting more of the party is fun. I do feel like how, even though the party is given, or the company is given, a book and a half, and a little bit of The Last Wish is devoted to them as well. Or not The Last Wish, a little bit of Lady of the Lake is devoted to them as well. I don't feel like we get enough of them, and those parts in this are great. The Ciri stuff, I have a major problem with how much bad stuff happens to Ciri in this book, and I don't like reading about, sexual assault to minors, and a lot of this book is that, and it makes me feel weird. I don't know. We then have The Witcher: The Last Wish. I think from here on, all the books are pretty good. The Last Wish is the first in the series. Mostly short stories. The reason why I have this so low down is just I don't feel like all of the stories hit. It's only really that last one that hits as it's supposed to. All the rest of them are kind of forgettable. But that last one is really good. And, Yennefer and Geralt's banter and their relationship throughout the series is great. And the last short story in this book is where that all kind of stems from. And as much as I dislike Dandelion in this, as much as I have a problem with some of the other characters in this book as well, as much as I just can't remember what happens in half of the book, I feel like that last story does do a lot of heavy lifting for this book in general, and it kind of carries all of the other short stories on its back. We then have the book that we talked about in this video, Season of Storms. I don't need to talk too much more about this. I like the structure. I feel like the structure is what does a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the actual story. The ending does a lot of heavy lifting for this one as well. Whereas the opposite can be said for The Witcher: Time of Contempt. The middle of this book is where it shines. The ending of this book is why it's lower than the three in front of it. I feel like if the last two chapters were anything but, then I would have a much higher regard for this book. But where the series goes and what happens to Ciri at the end of this book, there's no need for it. There is no need for Ciri to be essentially raped twice by characters that are going to be with her for the rest of the series. How many... And it just is such a weird, dark thought to think how many times was Ciri SA'd before she ended up falling in love with her abuser, essentially. And the fact that there's stuff there's stuff that leads into even the end of the series where Ciri goes to her grave, goes to Missel's grave, and I'm just thinking, why are you there? I don't get that part of this. I don't get that part of the book really at all. But also, I'm not inside the mind of Sapkowski. I don't get the inner workings and the inner cogs of his characters and the way that they're written and why they do the things that they do. All I know is that the actual siege on the siege on Thanaid, or the Temple of Thanaid, is the coolest moment in the series, and it's one of the best. And I think the way that it was presented in the book and having that be pretty much shot for shot, scene for scene, like it being in the book exactly how it is in the show, or being in the show exactly how it is in the book. I'm so glad that is the road that they went, and they didn't change anything with that. Getting there, it takes a lot longer in the show to get there than in the book, which I'm happy about. However, the ending really drags that book down. We then have my third favourite book in the series, The Witcher Sword of Destiny. Short stories, all of them much better than the ones in The Last Wish. Even the Last Wish itself is not nearly as strong as the weakest story in the Sword of Destiny. And the ending of this book, the ending, Something More, I believe it's called, is the single most emotionally gripping moment in the series, I think, in my opinion. I really like the tone of this book. I like the tone of that one specific short story. You know, the introduction of Ciri is done really well. And yeah, it does a thing of leading into the main series without feeling like it's forcing you to read the rest of the series. Obviously, it's highly recommending you to read the rest of the series, but it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like you need to read the rest of the series to understand where that book ends off, and the point of the book is almost completely different to the point of the rest of the series. We then have my second favourite book in the series, Baptism of Fire. For so long, this was my favourite book in the series. I feel like maybe the only reason why this isn't number one is because I feel like this has the best ending, or the best like conclusion or climax of any book in the series, in my opinion. Getting there is a chore. Getting there is, you know, the first like half of this book is hard to get through. I'll be completely honest. The first half of this book is slow. How much real estate does Ciri have in this book? Basically none. There are some flashes to what she's doing with the rats, but none of it really matters. It's all just kind of like, oh, she's being stalked by someone. But who? What's going on? I don't know. Are you interested? Get back to Geralt, please. And then it does. And then there's so much good stuff in this. You know, getting to know the characters in there, getting to know the company. There's so much good in this book. Honestly, it's the funniest book in the series as well. Definitely an easy second place for me. And the best book in the series, the thickest book in the series, and the final book technically the final book in the series, although not releasing the last, but canonically the last book in the series, The Witcher, The Lady of the Lake, is the best book in the series, and it kind of has to be because it's the last one. Yeah. Just a really heartfelt send-off to characters that I personally fell in love with over the last half a year, and getting through this felt like a genuine achievement. Getting through the Witcher series in general felt like a genuine achievement, but this is the most fulfilling book I think I've ever read. And, you know, obviously because, you know, this is the first series that I've kind of stuck to 100%. But yeah, overall, if I were to recommend The Witcher, which that's not what this video is about. This video is about me rambling about books that I read. And, you know, I liked The Witcher a lot. Yes, there's problems with the treatment of women in the books. And yes, there is a lot of SA. And yes, basically all of Ciri's story is essentially torture porn. But I really like the character of Geralt. He's a stoic, you know... he's, like, just really easy to fall in love with. And, you know, Yennefer is great as well. I don't know if the world and everything around the characters is as strong as the characters itself, and maybe that's something that I will find out going through the next series that I read, which will be Mistborn. I've even, you know, started a bit of Mistborn already. I haven't read nearly enough to get an opinion on it yet, but the next one of these that I will be doing will be talking about Mistborn, the first book in the Mistborn series, which is just called Mistborn. And then Well of Ascension, then the last one, which is The Hero of Ages, and then, you know, we'll be doing a ranking of that. And then we've got the Stormlight Archive, which is just huge chunky boy after huge chunky boy, and I'm so excited to get into that series. But even just starting Mistborn, it's a completely different voice, because obviously it's the voice of not only an American, but also a voice of, you know, 2015, you know, and it's a completely different kind of language being used, and I probably will find Mistborn and the Stormlight Archive a lot more easy to get through than The Witcher, even though I think I got through The Witcher pretty easily anyway. But yeah, I think starting a series that was started in 2015 is going to be a lot, like, it is going to be a different experience than the series started in 1998. Obviously. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to Mistborn anyways. But yeah, this is going to be a big, long video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me ramble about the Witcher series. There is a final book in the series that will be out. I assume the English translation will be out later next year in 2025. But I'm going to try and wait until it's in one of these editions with the white background and the stone kind of like medallions on the cover. Much like I'm going to try and wait for Wind and Truth to be in paperback. But yeah, I'm really loving this kind of foray into fantasy fiction or speculative fiction. I want to try, when I'm done with Stormlight, I want to try a sci-fi series. So if people can put recommendations in the comments for sci-fi books to read in the near future, then I will give those a shout. But Mistborn's probably going to take me a couple of months to get through, and Stormlight is going to take me probably another half a year. So it's going to be a while before I get to any sci-fi stuff on my TBR, and there's probably going to be a lot of stuff coming out next year that's going to be added to my TBR as well. Not disregarding the comic book stuff coming out next year as well. Ultimate Wolverine looks really fun. The World Under Doom looks really fun as well. I still haven't started any of the Absolute books. There's a lot of stuff coming out next year, and, you know, hopefully that Wolverine game comes out next year as well. We're definitely going to be streaming that once I have a Elgato set up and all of that lovely stuff. But yeah, 2025 looks really fun for me, just in a sense of content-wise and just consuming nerd media-wise. Let it not even to disregard Fantastic Four coming out next year as well. Thunderbolts looks really fun. Superman, new frickin' Superman movie comes out next year. That's going to be a lot of fun. Creature Commandos comes out in the UK in a couple of months. I know it's already out in America on HBO Max. We don't have HBO Max here, so we've got to wait for it to come out on Sky. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool things coming out. I'm going to have another video coming out later on in the month discussing my favourite things of 2024. There's been a lot of cool stuff that's come out this year, and a lot of games that I've only just, you know, gotten into over the last, like, literally the last month. Astrobot, I'm only now just getting into. Hi-Fi Rush, I'm only now getting into. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I have played barely any of. Sonic and Shadow Generations, I played the Sonic part. I haven't yet gotten into the Shadow Generations half of that game. And there's still a lot of catching up to do on 2024 games. And then, you know, 2025 is going to be an all new year for games as well. Yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.